您好，欢迎使用简易免费数字人。
蔡英文，中华民国总统，注定是一个风云人物。
他长出一张淡泊名利的脸，然而大家都被他的外表给欺骗了。他居然是汉奸的后代，母亲还为日本人生过孩子。
被蔡英文宠幸的男人有很多，在蔡英文的政治生涯乃至情感生活中扮演重要角色。
表面風光無限的他，與多位知名人士有過不為人知的曖昧糾葛，權謀、慾望構成了他風流往事的一部分。如此吊詭之人，
如此吊詭之人，
如此吊诡，
如此吊诡，
不妨一起扒开他的画皮。小说《蔡英文秘史》已在各大网络小说平台上线。
In April 2024, the Microsoft Threat Analysis Center released a report on cyber operations in East Asia to much fanfare across the media. Its revelations certainly promised to be groundbreaking. For the first time, Microsoft had confirmed the use of AI by a nation-state to influence another country's election. The threat actor behind these attacks was China's state-linked Storm 1376, a group suspected of orchestrating disinformation campaigns across 175 websites in 58 languages. As we explore the future of information warfare in Taiwan and beyond, we must ask, how significant is the threat from generative AI, and is this new tech toy taking attention away from the underlying issues that really threaten global democracy?
One of the findings of the Microsoft report was the use of AI-generated images were an advantage to the adversary because they were more appealing and drove more engagements. This is definitely a finding we would agree with. Leading up to the Taiwan election in January 2024, we uncovered a 6-month campaign targeting the DPP, claiming that DPP candidate Lai Ching-te had an illegitimate son, and the second campaign involving a book claiming that, at the time, current DPP president Tsai Ing-wen had a secret history of using her body to rise to power.
That used all kinds of AI services, fake news anchors, fake text, image, audio, and video. Really, they're using AI for AI's intended purpose, which is efficiency and scale. And these are the business cases that are actually given by commercial AI providers. We don't consider this to be new. OpenAI released a threat report suggesting that state-backed actors have experimented with their technology, but that they haven't seen that experimentation lead to meaningful traction.
There is a danger when we talk about AI, especially in the context of elections, to over-index on the threat of AI in particular, rather than more banal uses of disinformation that could actually be much more threatening.
At this point in time, the greatest threat that AI poses to the information space is in damaging trust. So this is also where we need to be careful about not overhyping the impacts of generative AI. We need to not jump to kind of apocalyptic conclusions where everything we see is fake, everything we see is wrong, nobody can be trusted, and just fall back on our kind of tribalism and fall back into our own echo chambers. Because this kind of polarization is exactly what information manipulators are trying to achieve.
China is really moving from positive China messages to driving polarization. We see that these are tactics that China is really embracing in other contexts as well, including in the United States.
The fundamental strategy of disinformation actors has not changed since 2018. They may have new tools, but ultimately Russia, China, Iran, and any other autocracy aims to decrease social unity, rip into social divisions, and ultimately weaken democracy. Taiwan's political landscape is uniquely complex, marked by a deep division between those aligned with the historical Republic of China and those who advocate for a distinct Republic of Taiwan, leaving the country wide open for exactly this type of disinformation exploitation. To understand this, we must go back to 2018 and revisit one last time the story inescapably woven into the fabric of this entire series. Kansai Airport, Japan, 2018. A devastating typhoon has left thousands of tourists stranded. A rumor begins spreading that the Chinese government has managed to arrange for buses to rescue its citizens. The Taiwanese government has not. A vicious backlash against the government springs up online and in the media. A few days later, Taiwan's representative to Japan, Su Chii-cherng, tragically takes his own life. You are probably familiar with the story by now. We certainly are. In the process of making this documentary, we heard it almost as many times as we had interviews. But the story was not the same every time. It was slippery, shifting to fit the contours of its speakers' beliefs. The only constant was a sketchy outline of typhoons, buses, and a suicide.
In the aftermath of this tragedy, there was this rush to find evidence that disinformation was coming from China. Especially for politicians in the DPP, they know that they can campaign on this issue. And they know that if they make very loud or provocative statements, if they post on social media about it, if they talk about it in press conferences, that will energize their base. People who tried to be a bit critical of the politicians who would really hype up the threat, it was very easy to say, you must be pro-China, you must be pro-KMT, and that wasn't true at all. Many of these people are deeply concerned about Chinese disinformation. For some of them, they've been studying it for decades.
I believe that the current DPP government politicized, information warfare by China to make the general public believe that criticizing government means that you must have been a collaborator of the Communist Party. We should protect and defend our right to criticize the government without being labeled as under Chinese influence.
Of course, this happens quite a lot with the KMT as well. Both before the 2020 and 2024 elections, they would often look for times where they said the DPP was cracking down on free speech and say it's a new green terror. That's going to play very well with their base. So this is what happens. It just becomes too polarized. We saw this with the Su story. People in the DPP saw evidence that China was spreading this information and put it into a narrative of this is the effect Chinese disinformation can have. The KMT, meanwhile, they saw that Slo Yang, the Taiwanese influencer who ended up being fined and imprisoned for her role in spreading that story, and the KMT seized on that to say, it's not China. Look, it's people who are actually deep green. It's the DPP. Both the DPP and KMT tried to fit it into their own silos, and it got to the point where even Su's widow was saying that the reporting was irresponsible. She later even said that he had feared humiliation from his superiors and that the spread of disinformation was not a factor. So we probably will never have a clear answer of exactly what happened, but ultimately the reality is that Chinese actors know that they can target weak spots, they can target things that will make people disagree with each other, and there's little room left for actual solutions for the betterment of society.
The polarization of the discourse around information manipulation in Taiwan does make it very difficult to deal with. We have information manipulators playing both sides. They'll be pretending to be on the Taiwan side, and they will attack people that are seen as pro-China with very aggressive comments, hoping that they have miscarriages or this kind of really horrible comments that are just so emotionally loaded. And on the other side, the same people. This is true in Taiwan as it is in the US, and that is to drive polarization.
Taiwan is far from the only country suffering from extreme polarization and grappling with the autocracies hell-bent on deepening it.
The Disinformation Governance Board was meant to be a coordinating body within DHS. I was picked to be executive director of the board because of the research that I had done. And when my position was announced, unfortunately, many people kind of started to lie about the board and its purpose. And some people, including Tucker Carlson, even went as far to say that I would have men with guns at my disposal to send to individual Americans' homes with whom I disagreed. It showed that disinformation has become a politicized issue, and I worry what that's going to mean for democracy around the world.
The thing that, all democracies really have in common is that threat actors are weaponizing the openness of the information environment and the openness of the internet. And there's really this kind of instinct and desire that you see to really become more closed or build up digital walls. But this isn't going to make societies more resilient in the long term.
As an industry, one of our common recommendations is additional media literacy. Like, that's a drum that everybody has banged for decades. That's great, 100%. but also you want a population that's generally engaged with civic ideals and protecting the kind of integrity of their institutions.
It's kind of an unsexy thing to say. You need to shore up institutions instead of employing some great new, AI tool to detect foreign disinformation wherever it may be. But given the nature of, how threat actors are evolving, really trying to stoke these political divisions, you can see that's kind of the most effective way to really meet the threat.
And it's not by chance that both government and civil society in Taiwan have spent the better part of 10 years testing and implementing exactly these, if unsexy, then highly serious ideas, promoting media and civic literacy and expanding public participation in democracy.
我们在选举的时候，大概有50个新闻机构跟单位来访问我们，就是在选前，尤其是选前非常的密集。我们常常被问到的就是说 ，What can we learn from Taiwan?
The Taiwanese population is incredibly resilient and can really sense these campaigns. People who are primed to distrust information from certain sources and who understand the signs of those disinformation campaigns, they're more resilient, right? And so they can push back against them. They won't be fooled by them.
We haven't seen an effect on Taiwanese identity. We haven't seen an effect on Taiwanese will to maintain independence and to be an independent democracy. And that's thanks in large part to a very strong civil society sector. We have many people who are extremely selfless in giving of themselves, of their careers, of their time, often for very little pay, if any at all, in order to keep Taiwan safe.
Behind this vibrant civil society is a government which gives them space to thrive, but is also proactive in doing what it can to reduce polarization and solve social conflicts.
In Taiwan, we've learned to pre-bunk by ensuring that there are ways for people to continuously participate through civic assemblies, e-petitions, and so on, so that new societal conversations do not reinforce existing party lines. And moreover, we've been pre-bunking synthesized information since at least 2022, where I film myself deepfaked and spread it as an advertisement video to everyone. And in Taiwan, we've deployed the Digital Signature Act for the first time, providing a very strong legal guarantee that if you use a digital signature, unless your name happens to be Tang Feng or Audrey Tang, you cannot sign as Audrey Tang to post advertisements on the internet. And that will curb impersonation attacks and polarization attacks that we have seen close to an election.
我们人民的数位的公民素养日渐的提高，假讯息的攻击虽然越来越猛烈，但是只要我们的公民素养能够不断透过我们现在政策上推动的公民媒体识读素养耕耘下去，那这样的免疫力集体的提升，那这种韧性就足以对抗假讯息对我们的危害。
Our polarization after election actually went way down, so that people across all three major parties don't hate each other after the election.
The general population in Taiwan were very alert about possible disinformation from China, but the problem is that that sort of mental preparedness is not there if we look across countries and over time. So I think the election in Taiwan hints at what needs to be done in order to prevent disinformation to have the effects it usually has.
As the most targeted country in the world with disinformation, I think Taiwan definitely has a lot to teach democratic societies in particular as we deal together with this, ongoing threat.
Generally, from the global open source research community who are very interested in lessons learned coming out of Taiwan, that kind of companion architecture from government, from media, from civil society, I really do think that kind of cooperative environment is one of the main benefits, and I think that's lacking in other places.
If most of our democratic allies succumb to polarization attacks, then Taiwan stands alone. And as I said, democracy is never an island. So we need to export the societal resilience to the world so that everyone in democratic societies can stand protected against such polarization attacks from generative AI and from those advanced cyber threats.
It's perhaps a tiresome cliche, but I think it is true that Taiwan really is the sort of the canary in the coal mine of active, focused, authoritarian information operations that are intended to subvert democratic society.
As this journey through Taiwan's tangled information environment comes to an end, the lessons from this small country stand as a stark warning to the world. This small island democracy has been at the forefront of an information war for almost 70 years. The country's resilience and ongoing defense strategy, media literacy, civic engagement, and legal frameworks offer a blueprint for democracies globally. If the international community does not heed these lessons, democratic discourse could break down, leaving societies vulnerable to manipulation and division. We must either learn from Taiwan's vigilance or risk the consequences of a world misled by unchecked disinformation. The world must heed the canary somehow thriving in the most targeted coal mine on Earth.